Hello guys, today I'm going to show you how to change the water pump and timing belt on a Honda CRV 2000 model. And I will walk you through step by step. Before we start the job, there is a vital tools we need to have. And before you undo any nuts or screws, you need to have these things. The first thing you need to have is this tool. That's the special tool for harmonic balancer nut. That's the 30 bucks from eBay. You need to have that. There is a torque wrench. That's a little bit expensive tool, but you can probably borrow it from your friends or anyone. These are the parts and my tools and a pipe. I'll tell you what we're gonna do with that later. Okay, the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take the wheel off so we can get access to the underneath the car easy. Okay, wheels off. The next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna drain the coolant. Yellow butterfly screw under the radiator. You can see there. You just can undo that. So the next thing you're gonna do while we're draining the coolant is to open up this plastic cover so we can see the belt and the pulley. There is 1, 2, and 3 11 mil screws to get that plastic cover off. Okay, plastic cover off. We just bend it forward so we can get access. Now we have drained the coolant, take off the wheel, took the plastic cover under. The next thing you're gonna do is gonna remove that air line out of the way. Next thing we're gonna get out of the way is the air compressor. There is 2 screws, one here and one down here. So one in here and one down here, and they are 13 millimeter screws. So now I have taken out these 2 screws of the power steering, and I took the belt off. And to remove the container, the power steering oil container, just twist that metal and pull it up, and now everything is loose and we can get them out of the way. Now the power steering out of the way, I like to put the screws back where they belong, here and one at the power steering itself, so we don't lose them. The next thing we're gonna do is we have to remove this engine mount. There is 1, 2, and 3 2 nuts and 1 screw. We have to remove that to get access to the belt from the top. But before we do that, we have to support the engine with the jack. So because when we remove the engine mount, the engine will come down, so we're going to support that so it's not coming down. Next thing we want to do, we're going to remove the spark plug leads. I just marked them 1 line, 2 line, 3 line, 4 lines, so not to, mix them up. So you just pull them out like that. So we get them out of the way. And the next thing is we're gonna take the rocker cover off. So we're gonna have to remove that hose like that. And this one out of the way. And now we got 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, probably 5 screws to get the rocker cover off. Now we slowly, with the screwdriver, without damaging the head, lifting up the rocker cover, because as you can see they have used sealed, so later on we have to apply seal when we put the rocker cover back in. There is these washers that sits all around. Some of them can come loose. Be careful not to lose them. So 2 of them loose. As you can see, none of them is loose again. And we got the rocker cover seal that has been sticking here, so we have to carefully remove that so we don't rip it off, otherwise we're gonna have to buy another seal. So I just turn the rocker cover, and now we can see our belt. This is the belt we're gonna have to change. Just take a piece of razor and scrape away all the seals that stick to the head, and we're gonna make sure that we don't get them in the engine. Clean all around. Anything that is left here. And the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna remove this plastic cover. There is 2 10mm screws. I have loosened them by a socket ratchet. Now I'm just undo them. These 2 bolts coming out, and the plastic cover removed. I put the screws back in the cover so I know where I took it from. As you can see, the cam has been marked. You see 1 arrow here and 1 here, and they align up, and there is 1 on the other end, so it's been marked. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna come down here with a 19mm socket, turn the crankshaft until these 2 arrows lining up. But that's not enough. I like to mark it myself so I don't make the mistake. So I like to count teeth between the arrows. So once these 2 line up, I see the first tooth of the belt that is engaged with the cam pulley. I mark that, and the next one that is fully engaged is here, and I'm counting the teeth between them. So it's 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12. So I'm just writing here 12 teeth between them. So I'll mark it here. So it doesn't harm. Mark as much as you want so you don't make any mistake. And on the other arrow, right in front of the arrow, you can mark that teeth too. And the same on the other end. So now we have marked 1 2 3 4, and between these is a 12 teeth. Okay, now what I'm gonna do is there is this tensioner that's tensioning the belt for that tensioner. We have to get rid of that to remove that belt, and this piece of metal that holding the power steering container is actually in the way, so I'm taking that off, out of the way. I'll put these screws. Back in. Now I'm going to undo that screw and this nut. As you can see, when I undo the nut and take the screw out like that, the belt goes loose, and there is this other screw. When I take that off, like that, so these two, and then we can take that tensioner out of the way, like that. All right. This belt is the power steering belt that's run the power steering, and you can see that's very good belt. I'll just take that off and I write power steering on it so I know what it is. This second belt, so we're counting from the front. The first one on the pulley on the harmonic balancer goes to the power steering. The second one run the aircon, and to get that out we have to remove that engine mount down here, which I'm gonna do it later with 2 bolts. It has to be removed. It looks like you can see a lot of cracks here, so I'm gonna replace that. And the third belt is going from the crank into the alternator. Can you see the alternator here? So that is the alternator, and this belt runs the alternator, and there is, as you can see, there's lots of cracks on that, so we're going to have to replace this too. When I remove these 2 bolts to get the belt out, I saw that this engine mount is pretty done, so we have to change that too. So I can just put the belt, take the belt on the top, but instead I open up that nut and take the whole lot out and take the belt out. As you can see, it's an old car, and this car has done 240,000 Ks and very reliable, so I think I'm gonna maintain that car for another at least 150,000. So this thing has to be changed. To taking the alternator belt off, I previously said that we have jacked the engine to help it out, not to fall. I have lowered the engine now, and now we're gonna go up there and loosen the alternator. To loosen the alternator, there is 2 screws. 1 screw needs to be loosened. So this screw needs to be loosened, that I have loosened it a little bit, and there is a slot behind it. After you loosen that screw, now we're gonna have to use this Q-bar and support it between the alternator and the body and just pull. See, the alternator is moving, which means the belt is now loose. You can move the alternator easily, and I'm going to take that belt off. That's it. This is the alternator belt, and you can see all these cracks. So this needs to be changed too. Okay, now we want to open the harmonic balancer, and what happened here is this needs a lot of force to open. So we've got a 19 mil socket. It goes through this special tool for Honda that I'll show you, and a 1/2 inch square. So we just put it here to hold the pulley in place, and then you're gonna have to open it with a 19 mil. And this pipe that I show in the beginning of the video is to get a leverage to open that screw. As you can see here, I had to dismantle the front bumper. That's because I didn't get enough leverage to open that screw. So I had to open that up so I can get a leverage from up here. From up here, as you can see, I'm getting more leverage to open that nut. If you can't open it, don't panic. Just a little bit extra job to get that off. So first thing we need to do is you have 1, 2, 3, 4 screws, and 2 screws through these holes that goes to this. We take the grill off, and each end of the bumper you got 1 screw up under here, and 2 and 1 under here that screws into this cover. So you undo that, and you take that mud holder with 3 screws here, take that off so you get better space. This is the reason I had to take the bumper off. And now I've got that harmonic balancer loose. As you can see, easy. Open. Now you have to pull the pulley out. We can just wiggle it and pull it out. Note that there is a keyway and there is a key that holding the pulley into the shaft. We're gonna have to be careful when we pull the pulley out. Don't lose that key. So I'm just wiggling it easy. Get that out. See, key is still in place. Take the pulley out. Take that key. Don't lose it. And there is a washer here. This is very important not to lose. And the way sometimes there's a little bit of take time to take it out. Just take your time. So I pulled it out that way, and what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna mark it. So which way is gonna sit? This is important to sit that way because it's curving one way. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a white mark here. So this is pointing outside, for not to make a mistake when we put it back in. Okay. The next step is to take that plastic cover off to access the belt. To take that cover off, there is 3 screws. 1, 2, and 1 up here. These 3, which is a 10 mil screw. So I'm just gonna take that off. Looks like there is another screw right on there. There is a access hole here, but you can't access it from the bottom. So what you need to do, you need to jack the engine up so you can access it from on the top here. So it is a 10 mil screw. They will really make it hard for us to get that last screw out. And now easy to get the cover. Now it's easy to get that cover out. Now the cover is out. So that screw I was talking about was sitting right here. So we have 1, 2, 3, and the 4th one is right here. And that what you can use a 10 mil pipe to open it up. And it looks like that the seal has been broken, but that's not a big deal because it's actually not covering for any oil or anything. It's just for the dust. So we're just gonna put it in place when we finish. And the 3 or the 4 and the screws that holding this cover, they are all exactly the same, so you don't have to be worried where to put them. So I'm just gonna put it in the cover and put it aside. Now I'm gonna lower the engine so we can access the, we still keep the support. But we lower the engine to access the belt. So once the cover is removed, now we can see the water pump right up there. That's the water pump. That's the tensioner. So before we remove any of that, we're gonna have to mark the belt again. This is very important. Okay, now I'm going to turn the crank to wind the crank until I get my marks where I had them. So now I've got my marks, and there was 12 teeth between them. So when we are in this position, now we come down and marking the now I'm gonna mark the belt down the bottom. One mark here, one mark here, and one mark here, where all the 3 teeth are engaged with the belt. I just marked them to make sure where I am. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is to loosen the tensioner, the belt tensioner. That is a 14 mil. So we just loosen the tensioner. From now on, we're gonna have to be very careful not to move the cams. But because we have marked them, so it doesn't really matter. So now I have loosened the tensioner, and you can see that the belt goes loose. There is a spring here. There is a spring here that as I loosen that, it will pull the tensioner toward itself. So we're gonna have to be careful not to. So I'm just loosening that. Take the bolt out and easy remove the belt. So pay attention which way the belt has gone. So the belt comes down around the crankshaft, around the tensioner, and around the water pump and up. So now I'm gonna pull the belt out. Belt is out, and I'm just pulling the tensioner out and release it from the, see the spring is sitting like this. So we just remove it from the spring. This is the tensioner, and I remember which way, so I'm putting the spring up there in its place so I can remember where it was, like that, just hanging there. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take the water pump out. So to get the water pump out, there is 1, 2, 3, 4 screws. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 screws. When we take the water pump out, I'm gonna be careful because there's a excess coolant is gonna run down. So I'm just putting the bucket underneath. When I take the water pump out, all the coolant is gonna run down. Now I have my belt marked that was sitting around the crankshaft, and I have the same marks on the pulley on the crankshaft. So when I put the new belt on, these 2 points was engaged, and the third one is in the center. On the top as well, we were marking the cams. So now I'm going to remove the water pump. So now the water pump is removed. There is actually 5 bolts. 2 of them is longer than the 3. The 2 long ones, one sits when the water pump is, when we're removing the water pump, the long one sits here. The short ones is all around, and there is another long one that sits down the bottom. So the water pump sits like that. One long one down the bottom right, and one long one on the left, and there is 3 other that sits all around it. They are short ones. So one more thing is, now I've got a new water pump here. As you can see, the seal has been compressed, so there is actually no compression, very dead seal, and it was actually leaking. The new water pump, and then you can see actually bearing is not that bad. You don't hear any, there is no slack or sound of the bearing, but the seal is totally done. New water pump, we got a new seal. As you can see, is sticking above the surface, which is going to give us a good compression. Now I'm gonna apply a little bit of a sealant for sealing flexible assemblies. That does give us a peace of mind that we don't get any leak. This is our old timing belt. You can see all the zebra lines coming out. It's pretty worn out, and that's a new belt. You can see tell the difference. Make note of our markings on the old one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 teeth. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna mark anywhere 2 marks and counting 12 teeth between them, and put the belt on. We're gonna have to make sure that the cams are pointing where we mark them. Here's the important part. As you can see, I mark on the old belt 2 marks here, 12 teeth in between, and 8 teeth on the left and 8 to the right. Same marks is on the cam. You see 1 mark here, 1 mark here. So I'll put the same marks on the new belt. So I'm gonna line up the left one on the left here. See the marks? Huh? Yep. And I'm gonna zip tie this one. So make sure that it's not moving. And the next one, 12, as you can see here, the cam has moved 1 turn. So I'm gonna move my cam that is line up and I'm gonna zip tie the second one. And so same distance, 12 tooth between them. See, 2 marks lining up, and the 8 tooth on the left lines up with that mark, as you can see here, and eight on the right lines up with the right one. Okay, I have to explain something. There is a tricky way to put the belt on. So imagine this is a water pump in place and the tensioner sits right next to it. There is a pin coming out next to the water pump house out of the engine block. You're gonna have to put that hole through that pin. First, you put a belt on, so the belt comes. So the belt comes around like that. And around the tensioner like this. And then it goes around the crankshaft here. And it goes up over the 2 cams. So what we need to do is we put them around the cam We zip tight them up here, put it around the pump, put it around the shaft, and then we bring the tensioner in. This goes into the pin, and we just move the tensioner up so you can get the screw into place. Tighten it as much as you get that tensioner still easy to move, but not tight enough so we can move it. So when you put the screw through and the pin is here, you tighten as much as you still can pivot it. But if it's too loose, it will come out of the pin. So this is the trick. When you do that, and the belt is around here, around the crankshaft, and this is tightened enough, but the steel can move, the next step is you put the spring through here, and this is still loose. You pull the spring with a plier, a nose plier, and hook it against another pin sticking out of the engine block on the top. When the spring is in place, then you can push this up and tighten the screw in the center of the tensioner, and then you get the belt tightened enough so there is no slack in the belt. So this is the trick. Spring comes last, because if you put the tensioner in place, there is no way you can get the belt around the shaft. So that's the trick. So the belt is in place. Next one, we're going to put that cover. Remember, 1, 2, 3, and 1 in the center. So we put that seal back in, and we pull all that seals back in. It's an old seal. That's just covering for the dust. If you don't have, see, rest of it was gone, so I'm applying a little bit of that sealant. So this goes in place.
That's it.
All right, the plastic cover is in place. Now is this guy. Remember, the marking is gonna facing us. We put that in. This guy is in place. We're gonna have to rotate the crank. If the keyway is down, it's easier to have it up here, because then you can put the key right in and find the keyway, centralize it, and push it in. That's it. Pull in place. Comes to that harmonic screw, it's very important that we put some oil between the screw and the washer, because when we tighten that, it's going to give us a correct torque. But if it's not sliding easy, it will give us a false torque when we tighten that screw. Alright, the next thing I want to do is to tighten the harmonic balancer screw. As you can see, I have my special tool hooked with a 1/2 inch extension, supporting it on the right side, and here's my torque wrench. That's what we need, and that is set to 190 Newton meter and 190 Newton meter, and the same as 150 foot-pound. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to use my pipe, and I'm going to tighten that until I hear the click on my torque wrench. Okay, the nut is successfully tightened. The next step is to put on the alternator belt, aircon belt, and power steering belt. So as you can see, the first one on the pulley, that's for the, goes up to the left, that's for the power steering. The second one is for aircon, and the third one goes to alternator. So if we look at it from the top, you can see on my left, what I'm pointing at, that's the aircon, and is lining up with the second pulley, and the third one goes, and we see the alternator from the top, and the first one goes to power steering, which I have it right here because I took it off. So now I'm gonna put the belts on. So alternator belt is the first one we put on. It's on the far toward the engine, and you can see the alternator is loose. So I can go from the top and tighten and use the Q bar, push the alternator toward the back of the car and tighten the tension screw. So that's the first belt. Alright, the next one, the second belt we're gonna put on is the AC belt. See, it's the slack. I have it around the pulley. That is the tensioner. That is this bolt that I took off. Took the whole tensioner out. And there is a screw and nut up here, as you can see. When I turn that thing in, it's gonna push the back of the tensioner and lift it up that way. See, when I screw that, you're gonna lift it up that way. I'm gonna give it good tension to this AC belt. So I'm gonna do this knot just enough to still get tensioner to move. The rest of it I do with this screw and knot until I get the good get rid of the slack, and then I can tighten that screw. Okay, the AC belt is on and very good, not much movement. That's what I wanted. The next thing I want to put on is not the belt, because now I don't need to lower the engine up and down to access the screws. The next thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna put that new engine mount on, and with help of my jack, lift it up, put the engine mount in place, the lower one, and on the top, remember there was a little bracket here to hook the power steering container on. This bracket is this bracket, and I have the two screws still here for that bracket. So once I put the engine mount, then before I do the power steering, I'm gonna put that upper engine mount, install that, which is this one, because if you put that in place, then you cannot access the screws for putting the power steering pump and the container on. So first thing first, lower engine mount, upper engine mount, and then the bracket, and then the power steering. All right, new engine mount in place. I have to just do that screw and this one and this nut, the washer and the nut, and I have jacked the engine up high enough to get this correctly in place. So now I'm just gonna do the engine mount. So guys, now this bracket is in place for hooking the container. But before I put that in place, I realized that this windows washer container was hanging here because I had to take that off, as I told you, to get my pipe for undoing the harmonic balancer screw. Now I'm just putting that in place. It has 3 screws, one on that corner between this silver aircon gas tank, one here, 2, and you got another one right here. So I'll do that before I put the power steering pump back in. All right, power steering pump in place, belt in place. You can still see where I was written power steering on the belt. Container is in place. Now have a look at this square hole I was telling you. So I just put this wedge in here. When I push it, have a look at the belts moving when I'm pushing it. See, when I push that like that, I get that belt tightened, and then I can tighten that screw down here. Oh, it's a little bit dark, you can't see that, but the next job is to put a rocker cover back in. But before they do, this is a very important job and it needs a little bit of a patience. See this surface here where the seal is gonna sit? There is an old seal has been applied, so we have to clean that surface 100%, all this area. Take a piece of razor and scrape it. Try not to scratch the surface, and then you can see is an old seal around here. I'm going to reuse that, but there is some seal has been applied to the corners. We're going to have to remove them and apply new seal. So this is a bit of a patient job. So we do that before we put the rocker cover back in. All right, now the both surfaces are cleaned, and I get rid of all the residues here. Now the important thing is these corners I have applied some of my seal right in these areas where it comes with contact, because you know the oil, there is a lot of pressure here, and if you don't apply the seal, the oil will escape and you want to have leak, and you don't want that. And this seal is going to cover all these corners, so it's important to get on these 4 corners. And you don't really need here, but since the seal is a little bit old, I'm gonna put a light layer around the whole lot and then put the rocker cover back in. Rocker cover in place. Tighten the screws. Remember this metal bracket, don't forget that. This piece that is holding the hose from the power steering, remember that. This clamp we will open up, we screw that too. Now we're putting, the next is to put the leads and that cover over the manifold. Okay, now we've got the cover in, we got that pipe in, the PVC, all the leads, clamps, leads, all the clamps is in. The next thing is to put a coolant in. Now we're going to put the coolant in. Alright guys, everything is mounted, everything is checked. The negative wire on, battery is on, leads is on, all the clamps, everything is fine, coolant is filled. Now we're going to start the engine and it's going to run. Sounds like everything is working. Please subscribe to my channel, guys. Next time I'm gonna change the clutch on this car. Thank you.